All right, Terry, if you would open us up in prayer, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we pause, Lord, our busy lives to just recognize who you are as compared to who we are, and how much you love us, how much grace you bestow on us, how much you do for us each day. Father, we give you praise for all those things. We thank you, dear Father, for Christ who made it all possible to give us life abundant and life eternal. We thank you, dear God, for the special calling you've put on each one of us, Father, that is so unique. And God, we just pray that tonight, as Melanie has put so much time into this, God, you bless her for her efforts. And you bless us, dear God, with more knowledge and more intuition and more encouragement on doing the things we do to serve those who serve others. Father, be with our first responders, we pray. Help us, Lord, to meet their needs, however that may be. And God, will be careful to give you the praise and the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. The quick rundown, before you can really discuss a perceived death, is really just to understand the importance and the awareness and the attitudes when it comes to death in general. So before we go into that, that's what I want to touch base on just a little bit before, and then we'll get into the different attributes and stuff when it comes to perceived deaths, and we'll get into the scenarios to discuss. But so the first topic, there was a man in the Department of Psychology who was actually a part of Kenya, because there's a lot of issues going on in Kenya and all over the world right now. But one of his quotes, it said, "Death is an important part of our overall lifespan development, yet it remains trivialized or feared across many cultures. The perpetuation of death as a taboo subject continues to negatively affect the society, and death anxiety inhibits death preparedness, which could affect the quality of dying." A lot of times, especially when it comes to perceived death, fear of death also can actually affect the quality of living. You know, it's not just the quality of dying, you know, and a lot of times with trainings and chaplaincy and fire departments, there's so much significance and preparedness when it comes to the LODDs that because so many people want to be prepared for that, because most people don't even really know how they feel about death until they experience it. And one of the most significant things right now is that a lot of times we shield people from actually experiencing death. You know, before, death was handled very personally and inside everyone's homes. You know, and nowadays it's completely separated, especially in the past previous years with the pandemic and everything. Half the time you couldn't even be beside people when they were dying. You know, and a lot of times when someone's dying, a lot of times they shield children from even talking about it and things like that. And it can kind of give people a very negative effect when it comes to it, and they just want to shun it instead of actually embracing and understanding it. So one of the things was when we become aware. There was another psychologist, he actually said the frequent reminders of death strengthen the desires to invest one's substance in forms of life and work that will outlive the self. So a lot of times when we're dealing with death, that normally it comes with anxiety and reflection. The anxiety brings in the negative attitudes, you know, with the depression and anxiety about death in general. You don't even want to talk about it because it just gives you an uncomfortable feeling. Whereas a death reflection or a positive attitude about death gives you a meaning in life and a gratefulness of the life that you have. So you're actually prepared for death more when you actually reflect on it versus hide from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But forgive me if I'm trying to talk fast, but I want to make sure we focus a lot on the scenarios. But the three reasons mainly what the general psychologists have decided is that for the three reasons for negativity when it comes to death attitudes is the threatening dying process. So like the pain when it comes to dying, you know, or things that you regret not doing. So the unfulfilled life goals. And a lot of times it's actually the fear of hell, whether you, you know, whether you're religious or not, there's a lot of times there's a deep-seated fear that we don't really acknowledge until death is kind of right on our door. And the positive is that, you know, a lot of people would reunite with deceased loved ones or meeting their creator or God, and then sometimes it's ending a prolonged miserable or life, or even a fulfilled life, and so it's kind of like where you are satisfied with the way that you lived, or that you have had such a rough life that you're kind of glad it's over. In that kind of retrospect. But and then when it came to the three main types of death, there's the biological, or the brain death, and the functional, or the clinical death, and the perceived death, or some people call it the social death, that we're going to be discussing tonight. And a lot of the biological and functional death is along the lines of the LODDs, because this is when there's like no brain or electrical activity to the brain cells at all, and which is why they consider it a brain death. But the functional aspect is like what you go with cardiac arrest or drowning accidents. It's where when you have not breathed for 10 or more minutes, or your heart stops beating, that is the functional death, and that it can affect every part of your functional body to where everything else eventually dies as well. And the perceived death is when people kind of either shun you away, or you even shun yourself away because of the situation that you're in. You know what I'm saying? Your life has changed so much because of an incident or a diagnosis that you no longer have a purpose or feel worthy of being inside of society. Or other people deem you unworthy of being a part of society. There's a lot of time. Sorry, keep going.
Can I ask a question there?
Yeah.
Would you consider some of the deeper stages of depression to be under that category?
Yeah, well, in a way, it really just depends on if you have a true chemical depression, or if it's just a type of oppression in your spiritual and emotional aspects of life. You know what I'm saying? Because there are chemical depressions that have nothing to do with like your circumstances. It's just chemical. So there's a lot of times you have to be careful with diagnosing someone as just depression, But I mean, because perceived deaths are very subjective and they're very objective. I mean, like when I say that, I mean like subjective in that it's the perception of the remaining life that you have. How close do you feel to death because of what you have remaining in your life? Like there are times when people are given like stage 4 pancreatic cancer diagnoses, where it's like sometimes you're given 1 month, sometimes you're given a year, if that. It's very rare. But in a way, it's just a prolonged death that you have to watch people mourn in a way as if you've already died. You know what I'm saying? And you don't really know how to.
Hard to minister to them.
Yeah, you don't really know how to deal with it yourself. So instead of watching people mourning you, it's almost like you want to push them away so you don't have to watch it. Not that you mean to hurt them, but it just hurts you to watch them going through it. I mean, there were several times after my wreck that there was so much going on and so many side effects and stuff. I mean, there are times when I tell like my mom and dad, I'm like, listen, just put me away in a home. Y'all got other stuff that y'all have to deal with. It just hurt. Not so much what I was going through. I mean, yeah, that hurt, but it hurt watching other people watch me. You know what I'm saying?
And that,
So it was like, I mean, it's not that I was embarrassed, but I just did not want to see, because of my decision, that it wasted someone else's time. Because at that point, life is short, So that was one of the things that I had to deal with and come to terms with that. And they had to like basically tell me, it's like, we're not putting you away, but so we kind of refigured out a type of life. But that's what I meant about finding the purpose behind everything.
Right.
So anyway, but also the objective was that it's kind of like a referral when it comes to the actual span of time you have left. So that was more of the cancer, versus the subjective would be a amputation or a spinal cord injury. You know what I'm saying? Normally with cancers and certain diseases, it gives you a timetable. Like, you have 6 to 8 months, or 6 months to a year, or 3 years, or something like that. Whereas spinal cord injuries, or amputations. It's like you don't know what next infection is going to take you out or what you're going to have to fight next.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are some of the concepts that leads into the perceived death. But I did want, this is like an unknown quote. There's really no author attached to anything, but it says we don't get over or move on from our trauma. We're forced to make space for it. We carry it, we learn to live with it, and sometimes we thrive in spite of it. So the point of this quote that I wanted to utilize is that as a chaplain, this is what you have to help facilitate in a way to get someone that is in like dealing with a perceived death, that you have to get them to see that there is purpose despite what they're going for, like going through right now. You know, because a lot of times, and this is what we're going to go over next, is with the kind of the attributes and the perceptions of it. So with the perceived death, the attributes are really three main things, and that it's a loss of social identity or purpose, a loss of social relationships, or basically when you socially isolate yourself or people socially isolate you themselves. And then the deficiency related to the inefficiency of their body or their disease. So what it's changing about them that they cannot help or prevent. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so the perceived death perception. There's a lot of times when people perceive things that are going on in your life. You know, the deprivation of even belonging to society. Like I said, there's a lot of times where either you feel worthless or it's a reflection of how other people make you feel worthless. You know, you can become financially vulnerable because how can you do your job? You know, how can you take care of your family? All of those things coincide with these type of situations. It's not like in death where if you have a life insurance policy, your family's going to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? There's no life insurance policy when it comes to not dying. You know, there's a lot of times where financially is what really kind of cripples families in general, because with these kind of situations, it ends up being that medical bills and everything else start piling on so much that it's like, all right, do I get this type of therapy that I need, or do I make sure that my kids are taken care of with their school or with whatever they're going through, or with what my wife needs, you know, or my husband needs, whatever the case may be. The increased removed or weakened legal support. There's a lot of times where there have been laws put into place that can benefit people that have gone through any type of accidents or anything like that. However, they're very watered down and hard to actually fight. You know, most of the time you're just fighting to either keep your job or to do anything. It's difficult to even get really any type of support a lot of times, depending on what type of situation you're in.
Melanie, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
We had a power failure and I was gone and just got back on. And well, did you give a definition of perceived death?
Yes, excuse me, I'll go back. The perceived death is basically, it's like a social death. So whatever your injury or your diagnosis that you've experienced, it's when other people or even yourself begin to isolate you. So in other words, you are no longer welcome by society because of what is going on in your life, or you don't feel worthy yourself to where you actually isolate yourself away from others. It's kind of
okay, thank you. Thanks. I'm sorry. I was just gone. When the power went off, I lost you for a moment.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, like I said, I can go through a few of these again. Like I said, the attributes have to do with finding your purpose, or the loss of your purpose and the loss of social isolation, sorry. And then deficiencies when it comes to how your body or your disease is making you inefficient. Anyway, and then I'm assuming you heard most of this, but the deprivation when it comes to actually do you belong or are you worthy in society, the financial vulnerability, whatever loss of work or loss of ability for anything that makes you financially vulnerable. And then the lack of support and the stigma that comes with being disabled or being sick or being vulnerable in any situation. And then basically just the loss of identity itself. So a lot of times there's a lot of people that actually perceive paralysis or cancers as worse than just dying quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a dramatic fall that you die and you don't come back. There's no type of perceived suffering, I guess you'd say. Some people don't, like most people, actually prefer that to actually having a long, slowly drawn out demise, I guess you'd say, you know?
Yes.
Because a lot of times that's a big fear. It's like the idea of being strapped to a breathing machine. I mean, that was a big thing with COVID, is that a lot of people went through and were trying to figure out, how would I feel with this? And they started really looking into end of life care. You know, like if I get to this point, I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to be prolonged. I don't want to live in a way that I am suffering. You know what I'm saying? And that's a lot of, I mean, there's lawsuits all over the place where two married people will have to, like, if one of their spouse die or is in a coma state, it's like the other spouse that is left is in arguments with either kids or with parents of the other spouse on whether or not they can or cannot turn things off. So it's like a lot of legal paperwork that if that is what you decide to do, you have to get it legally, or your body is going to be tied up in law and court and in hospital. And there's a lot of times people don't want the doctors to, or the government to decide when that's okay for them to die or if they can live. It's one of the things that is an ongoing issue in other countries, especially with socialized medicine, that when they feel like you've taken enough from the government, that they will cut you off whether you have a chance to live or not.
Mm.
So it's just prolonged issues when it comes to the legalities, especially in regards to living or dying. But
Can I say something right there?
yeah.
Just interject something. There's something called a living will, and most of y'all are probably familiar with it, but
Yes.
We came to this decision through several circumstances. One was my father dying in a tragic accident, and he was killed instantly, but we talked about the what ifs. And anyway, Melissa and I, my wife and I, have signed living wills, and so has my mother, who lives with us. And that just means that the decision has been made. You take the pressure off of your family or survivors by making those decisions up front. It's a legal document, and all you got to do is produce that, and it's taken care of. For me, it was peace of mind, but it's something that, and we can talk about that later in a class sometime. But one of those things that, as a chaplain, you're also a counselor, and sometimes that subject may come up, and you can help guide people through that. But you have to get an attorney to do it. It's a simple document, but basically you make the decision for your family that should it come to life support, the decision's made. It takes the pressure off of them.
Or in my case, I just get mad at you. But that's for another day. That's another day. But sorry. And so I got all the living will and all that kind of stuff together, and then I had Mom sign it and everybody sign it and got everything done. And she just got mad at me when she finally read it a couple of weeks later. Without reading it, I'm like, you just giving a bad president.
I actually cried. Every time I read it, I cried.
Yeah, just put it away.
I had to turn my dog off, and I called my mother and I said, Mother, you better put this on paperwork, because I will never, ever want to make that decision again over somebody's life. It is a hard thing to do.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm like, I will put you down. I'm kidding. All right, so anyway, so the type of perceived deaths is a lot of times similar to the things that can actually kill you. you know, but there's a lot of things worse than, that don't kill you. So, so the paralyzing aspect can be stroke. It can be spinal tumors. It can be a spinal cord injury, ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, traumatic brain injuries. A lot of things that I highlighted or bolded are similar to these scenarios that I'm going to be talking about related to firemen. But the debilitating kind are the cancers, the amputations, the severe burns, and the cardiovascular diseases that it's not so much that it's a sharp heart attack. It's just, you know, disease comes with firemen anyway, just because the constant stress, even with policemen and other kind of stressful jobs and situations, that it just wears on the heart and kind of hardens the arteries so much in the lining of the heart that eventually you do so much damage to it that it's hard to resuscitate. You know, but having cardiovascular disease is also very debilitating in that you don't live your life in a normal way and that you get very winded. You can't do your job exactly as you could have before. You can't throw bodies over your shoulder. You can't run into fires whenever, like smoke inhalation, every other issue like that, because you get winded and other issues, you know? And then a lot of things that are coming up is the dementia and Alzheimer's aspect. And the most common really that gets debilitating when it comes to firemen is the musculoskeletal injuries that they sustain because of how much loading that they do, whether it's with their gear or with the amount of stuff that they have to lift or bodies that they're pulling out that are basically knocked out on pockets and fires and, you know, things like that. So a lot of firemen have shoulder, back, knees, hips, all kinds of issues and ankle issues just from jumping from things constantly that start hindering their ability to actually do their job right. And in some cases can actually permanently retire them.
Amen.
So I mean, pretty much every one of y'all have probably had some type of shoulder, knee, or back issue with the amount of time that y'all have been in this line of work, or have seen someone with those same type of injuries. So the next part is a little bit like the role of the chaplain with this. So, and I did do a brief review, especially with our first one when we were talking about the role of a chaplain. Because fire chaplains bring an outlet to where firefighters work, live, and to their families on a 24-hour basis. A lot of this has to do with, I mean, LODDs can kind of happen really fast, but these type of perceived deaths are ongoing and a lot longer than a 24-hour basis. You know what I'm saying? So they're going to be prolonged throughout your field, per se. But, and then I also put the quote because when asking why, it's because if you descend into somebody else's private hell and stand there with them, it ceases to be hell. And I really love that quote from that chaplain from New York. But yeah. So so for the first scenario, you know, everybody can probably be familiar with these four, but it's you are called to the scene of a house fire, but upon arriving, you are confronted by a completely different scene. You are told by the commanding officer that a firefighter had jumped from the truck at the scene and was struck by a vehicle. Severe trauma has been done to his body, and he is being treated at the hospital for multiple fractures and a spinal cord injury. A lot of these scenarios are very familiar. I tried to change up the scenarios a bit because a lot of these have happened in our own life and with the chaplaincy that my dad and mom have done. So I'm trying to be respectful to those scenarios. But in these kind of scenarios, have any of y'all experienced this type of incident?
I've had firemen injured, not that seriously.
Yeah, same here. Well, yes, but not that seriously, just like Gary.
Well, there was a fireman in my with Centerpoint that had been injured jumping off of a fire truck in Centerpoint. And this was back when my dad was the chaplain back then. And I believe, I want to say it was a dump truck or something that, a city dump truck, excuse me, that had come around and hit him when he got off the truck.
Mm.
And this is what I'm saying. There's a lot of times you may see firemen as going on a call, but a lot of times they become the call. And
Yeah.
that's a very hard scenario to wrap your mind around when you are going into things as you're going to be, you know, quote unquote, a hero, in which case you intended saving. You understand what I'm saying? And it's a whole nother thing when it's a stranger you're saving versus a fellow firefighter. You know what I mean? Or a chief. Like if you're working on a chief that just had a heart attack, it's a whole nother scenario. You know what I'm saying? It's a whole nother process of what you're doing. But these type of situations, when you are reacting to them, when you initially speak to these guys, when you come up to them, that is going to make or break the situation. It's not like something that you're going to be like, oh, he's going to be fine, don't worry about it. You can't do that kind of stuff. It's brushing off the seriousness. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
There's a lot of times where the first thing you want to do is go in there and make sure that you're comforting everyone. Comforting is not blowing off. You know what I'm saying? It's not making them forget what is going on. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times there's people, I mean, I know that they're trying to do like what they're trying to get it off your mind, you know, like to get it out of your head. But the thing is that it's not about getting it off of their mind. It's about getting them to actually embrace what's going on, acknowledge it, understand it, and being able to grow from it. You know what I'm saying? And because at this point, these firemen are going to become a type of caregiver to this other fireman. You know what I'm saying? They may not live with him, but technically all of these guys live together. You know what I mean? They're brothers and brothers and sisters or whatever you want to call it in a completely different way. You know what I'm saying? So these are a family. And when you see someone that's hurt as a family, it's completely different than seeing someone that has been in a spinal cord injury as a call, as a stranger. You know
Well, I'll
what I'm
tell
saying?
you, Melanie, can I interject something?
Yes.
Just thinking back to things that were similar to this, you know, first responders have a different personality when the bell goes off and when they see people that need help, and they just get out there and do what it takes. And so in a case like this, they're going to turn around and they're going to help their buddy and do everything they can.
Mhm.
The need for chaplaincy, to me, comes later when they're back at the firehouse, or 2 or 3 shifts down the road when it really sinks in what happened. You know, they go into that defense mode for a while. Sometimes it's for a few days, and but then it sinks in, and then it's like, oh my gosh, you know. Or if this young man dies or this young firefighter dies, then you got the role of a chaplain that really is necessary. It's after the scene.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like these are prolonged scenes. It's not just in the night or in the day that it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to talk about. Like, because there's moments where, I mean, this is a family situation, right?
Mhm.
When you're going into this, it's not somebody that got hurt in a type of company where they work on a separate floor and you don't really talk to each other much. It's just, oh, so-and-so David, did you hear he got hurt? It's not like, you know, another type of company. It's completely different and it's very personal because these are relationships that are based on, I mean, it's almost like military relationships, you know what I'm saying? Because y'all are in the fight per se with each other, you know? And those kind of concepts are very difficult because then if this person has a spouse that comes in and starts flipping out, it's a whole nother concept to bring in with you. Because not only do you have to work with all the fire departments, you have to understand their families. They're going to respond a completely different way as well and be emotionally available in a different way. You know, a lot of times with men, especially from a psychological perspective, men need to have a purpose. They need to have a goal. They need to have something to be met. You know, like, and a lot of times people say just men need purpose, you know, where there's a lot of times with women, there's a lot of details that they want to hash out. They're very emotional. You know what I'm saying? And they have to come around with that versus men try to put the emotions out and want to find purpose to where they can deal that way. You know what I'm saying? It's a completely different, I mean, it's just we have different ways of functioning and how we deal with situations. But with this one specifically, this is and I want to say that with this paralysis, it was like he would still come around. It's like they have to find a way to do their job that they in a different way. You know, a lot of times they go into 911 calls and things like that because they know the job. It's just they can't run into fires anymore. You know what I mean? It's trying to find them a realigned purpose to where, yes, they can take care of their family. Yes, they can be independent. Yes, they can work. Yes, they can, you know, be a value that they feel like they've lost because of what they're going through. You know, it's almost a way that you're trying to make sure they never lose their value, you know, as a human being. You know, and that's one of the hardest things because there's some people that never have anything going on, but they quickly lose their value based on their own emotion or mental facilities, you know?
Right.
But whenever it's a physical loss, a lot of times it's harder to really build back up that value again.
Melanie, what I do, and I stress, we have two separate ways to deal with this. Is diffusing is in the first hour or two. Usually somebody may be on the scene or maybe immediately back at the station. And then 3 or 4 or 5 days later, a critical incident stress management scenario, which lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do those two things.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times there's like several, like with what I do, I'm sent out afterwards, you know, because I deal with people that are paralyzed or have some sort of paralysis that they deal with. For instance, one girl that I'm dealing with right now, she has a child and she's still trying to find ways that she can have time and enjoyment with her child. So they try to find different things that they can do, even though, you know, mommy is not like she used to be, you know, but her specific disease is not a normal paralysis because it's just basically her body fights itself. So one day she could be walking around and then the next day she can't move her legs. You know, and then when she reworks that, tries to figure out and starts walking again, now all of a sudden she wakes up a couple of months later and she can't move from the neck down. It's just such a random thing. She's constantly retrying to find purpose and a will to live again. And she does that because of her daughter and for the life that she wants. You know, but if you can't figure out a way to get them to understand that there is still a life to be wanted, you know, that worth, that value, then it's very difficult to address that with someone. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes.
But all right, sorry, I'll go on to scenario 2. You run on a call to a scene of an accident, realize one of the injured are in fact a fellow firefighter who is off duty. The scene has now become very personal. Based on the visuals, a traumatic brain injury is being assumed and prepared for treatment. This is a scenario that's really close to me and my family because there was a firefighter in Centerpoint. Some of y'all may know him, Dana. And this is, okay, sorry. Well, this is similar to a type of experience he had, and that him and his buddies, after he had lost a child, it was stillborn, they went to a motorcycle ride down to Florida. All these firemen know better and have been on traumatic injuries and everything else when it came to motorcycles. But in Florida, there is a law that it does not require helmets.
No helmet.
Yes, so they all took off their helmets. A car veered in front of Dana's motorcycle and he had to lay it down and it caused him severe brain damage. Well, he eventually did walk out of it, but because of the reasoning aspect of his brain, he literally felt like he was invincible. But he had so much anger and frustrations. He could not control his temper, I guess you'd say. So there was a lot of frustration and strain on his marriage, as well as with the firemen in general, and that they could not control the situation. They were always trying to control him and not really figuring out that he did not want to be controlled. You understand what I'm saying? He was dealing with a lot mentally, but instead of really grasping and understanding and taking the time to break down, why do you feel invincible? What are you, what are you trying to hide from? Why are you trying to go about all these ways? I mean, he got to the point to where I'm invincible, don't need a seatbelt, don't need this, I didn't die with this, so I won't die kind of thing. And I developed a very close relationship with Dana because, I felt like a kind of a kinsmanship, because of everything going on. And he gave me a poem that he had written. I still had it. And I ended up writing. In my way, I was healing myself by writing about him, because when I get close to people, and it's one of the reasons why I don't like getting close to people is because I become very, my mom always said I had the gift of discernment. So I become very close with people in a way that it's almost like I take on, like if something's wrong with them, I feel it. And there was one night particularly that I was in so much pain. I could not figure out what was going on. I did not know why I was in so much pain. And when my mom came into my room, I'm like, Dana's dead, isn't he? And he had been in a car accident and he was thrown out of his vehicle, and then the vehicle had landed on him.
Oh my.
So, and there's a lot to do with that story, but the hardship with that is that in order for me being outside of the scenario, but being close to it, no, I was not a fireman, but I was close to them.
Yeah.
So what I did was that I just wrote my feelings down, I guess you would say, and really as if, I guess as if I was talking to him. And then after that, they saw like what I had written, and then they asked me to stick it, and it was just very difficult. I did it, but it was just very difficult. And yeah, but it's just those things. A lot of times it's not about trying to get them to be better. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of times where we want people to be so much better that we forget that they're human beings, they're emotional. The goal is not to be better. The goal is to, it's not to be better right away, I guess you'd say, but the goal is to find out the reason, so that way you can find purpose, not just betterment. If someone's walks out of it, that means they were better. He walked out of it, but he wasn't better. You get what I'm saying? A lot of times as a chaplain, you need to find the reason so you can find a purpose in this person to where they will actually be well, not just better.
Mhm.
If that makes sense. And it's one of the hardest things to do because it does take a lot of patience and a lot of very active listening. So if you're not an active listener, I would say to work on that, or don't really work in those kind of situations. But so scenario 3, it says you are called on the phone by a firefighter who is just told she has stage 3 breast cancer. Her husband is a fellow firefighter, and they have 2 boys and a little girl due in 2 months, meaning the person with cancer is pregnant. She is still in shock and has no clue how to feel, much less how to reveal this news to her loved ones. This is also another scenario that's similar, but it's kind of a mix between 2 different situations. But there's a lot of times where it's one thing to have cancer and have being able to make those decisions and the treatments and everything else, and to make those decisions. It is another thing, especially as a woman, to make a decision on your life knowing you're carrying another life. Because there's a lot of times where doctors will actually tell you to abort it so that you can get treatment right away.
Yeah.
And there's some people that would listen, can I have this baby and then be treated? And so a lot of times the doctors will frown on that, but some of them will actually listen to you and allow that to happen. But you have to be prepared that the cancer does progress and it can reach the baby.
Right.
In which case, after the baby is born, they would have to have treatments as well if it actually gets into their system.
Right.
Because like cancer, it all goes everywhere depending on how it does. And I mean, Wanda would be a lot more capable of answering the comments of breast cancer. But just watching her, there were several times as the daughters of her when she was going through this, it was as if we wanted to see her cry, just to know she was human in a weird way. But she was always so positive in that she's like, I have no problem with this. There's not many people that have that mentality or that assuredness about their situation. There's some people that want to blame everything 3 away from Sunday and get mad at everything and push everybody away, but this was not the case, to the point to where the family had a harder time with her cancer than the person with cancer did.
Yeah.
And those are kind of things that you have to deal with as a chaplain as well, because you're the chaplain to the families of these firemen and women as well.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it may not be that the firefighter needs you to talk to them, but they may need you to talk to their son or their daughter or their wife or their, whoever is, or their husband that is dealing with this. And those are the kind of things that a lot of times when you are speaking with these firemen and their families, a lot of times you'll speak with them together as well. And you have to be able to actively not only listen, but watch their demeanors, because there's a lot of people that say more with their actions than with their mouths.
That's
To know, sir?
Right about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that hold stuff in, and then they're the ones that are the most traumatized by it, and they react in a way that you don't expect, because you're focused on the person that has been diagnosed and not the person watching the diagnosis go through. There's a type of vulnerability when it comes to watching someone hurt. You know what I'm saying? And not being able to do anything physically about it to take away that pain. It's the same way it's like watching a child, hurt, that's been in an accident or experiencing stuff themselves. Having to watch them do that and not knowing how to help is one of the most frustrating things, because we want it to be better again instead of finding out the reason. Because a lot of people, sometimes the reason for the pain and frustration and anger is not even necessarily going to be what they're going through or what they're diagnosed with or their injury. It's not. There's sometimes that's deep seated, in which case that they are dealing with that and not so much what they're going through. And sometimes it's what they're going through and not anything else. So like I said, it's that being present and actively listening to these people to see when you can pick up what they're not saying, and also almost measure that together and mesh that together with what they are. Because there's a lot of people who say, well, my problem is this, but then their complete body language is saying something else, or their body language is saying something and their words are saying something else. Or they think they want to complain about one thing, but it's really deep seated with somewhere else. And it's a lot of I'll be honest, it's a lot of prayer. To be able to be discerning enough to know exactly what to say and what to look for, and being available to actually see it. Because there's a lot of times when you have a preconception of what somebody is going through, like a lot of times when I get emailed or called to go somewhere, like, because mine are mostly with people dealing with paralysis, they give me a injury level and an ASA number. And that's all I know. So if I give an ASA number, means it could be anything from A to D, where you either have nothing above your injury or nothing below your injury, a little bit below your injury, you feel below your injury, or you have a lot of stuff below your injury, or you're completely normal, in which case, I think it's AD. But those kind of scenarios are completely different. But if I go in there and say, oh, this person is a C4, ASA A, I would already have a preconceived sympathy per se for them, whereas they may not need or want sympathy at all. You get what I'm saying? Because sometimes when you hear a high level or a for a high Asia score, you automatically feel pity on these people. In which case, sometimes the ones that handle it the worst are the ones that have the most movement or the lowest level of injury, because they have, like, for instance, I'll give you an example, and this is like a little off topic for cancer, but I was a C45 AJ complete at the very beginning. Like, I had nothing. I mean, I was a limp noodle and a melted Gumby, if you want to like get a picture. But there was a guy, and I was slowly getting a little bit, maybe like a few finger flicks or something like that. I did not have much at the very beginning, at least maybe even in the first 2 or 3 years. You know, it was like I was lucky to be breathing, you know, and I worked hard to do that in the first few months.
Wow.
But what I'm saying is that I met a woman that was complaining constantly about her son. And she came up and, because I tried to speak with him in the hospital, but the longer I talked to him and I perceived his body language, I rolled away. And I told his mother he's not ready to talk. When he is ready, or when you've had enough, you know, you can contact me again. Well, a few months later, she had enough. So she was like, if you can't talk with him, if you can't do anything with him, I'm putting him in a nursing home. So I'm like, good Lord, what is the deal with this guy? Because he's in my house, rolling in by himself, completely independent upper body. And my first emotion was anger. So I had to just a little bit.
Hey, Melanie, I can't hear you. I think you're muted some. Are you moving away from your microphone? We're missing part of your words.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, sorry. I'll lean back a little bit. Well, when he came into the house, like I said, he was rolling around independently by himself. There was really nothing holding him back from having a normal life other than he wasn't going to be jogging. You know what I'm saying? So I had to work on my empathy and I guess my chaplain faith, you know, and that I was not going to land blast and try to shoot this guy with my eyes.
So you didn't get mad at him, huh? You didn't let him have it.
Well, well, he hadn't got that part yet. What I was saying was that I had to read his body language, not just his words, is what I'm saying. There's a lot of times where there's a lot of anger coming from his mouth because of this situation, because he was just not accepting of it. But what I noticed was that even though his body was saying he could be independent, his mouth and his mind and his emotions was all based on, how will I get married? No one will want me, all this kind of stuff like that. And it just triggered in me in that I don't even want you. In my situation, I don't even want you.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? I'm like, it has nothing to do with what you can't do. It's the fact of what you won't do that people have a problem with. You get what I'm saying? Those are two completely different things. And a lot of people don't understand that, is that it's not about what you can, it's about what you won't. There's a lot of stuff that I can't do, you know, but there's nothing that I won't do. You get what I'm saying? It's a very
least try.
It's a very weird play on words.
Yeah.
I mean, if I sat there and listened to every therapist, I wouldn't be doing any of the stuff that I'm doing, because according to the textbook, I shouldn't.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a very different thing about what is perceived and what it is. You know, so that's what I'm talking about. And eventually he came around to it. It's like, seriously, you want to? And it gave him a new perspective, and that it's my attitude, not my body. Yeah. So that gave him the perspective that he needed to find his self-worth. You know, and I'm not saying everybody's going to need to be hollered at, but it's just about knowing and seeing what needs to be said versus what is said, if that makes sense. But another aspect with scenario 4, as you're on the scene of a fire ravaging an apartment building, roughly 30 minutes into the scene, a wall partially collapses onto a young firefighter, pinning his leg from the knee down. After the fellow firefighters meters, removed him from the building. He was treated by paramedics and taken to the hospital. You are with this fiance when he is told there was significant damage to the nerves, tendons, and bones, and they were unable to save the leg. Those concepts are very difficult. There's a lot of times where the chaplain will be with the family. There's sometimes where they won't get there in time, and there's sometimes where the chaplain will be there before the family. Yeah, I'm sure all of y'all have a wide understanding of this when y'all are in hospitals or fire departments or wherever y'all are or on the scene of where y'all come in. Sometimes y'all are there first, sometimes y'all are there during, and sometimes y'all are there last, and y'all get the brunt of it. You know, because everybody wants to talk to you and like all at the same time, or they don't want to talk, and you have to figure out, read the room and figure out what is most important at that time. You know, and the loss of a leg is very significant, you know, and I mean, loss of an arm. And there's a lot of times where like your initial like idea is like, hey, if I send them all these videos of these other people that are missing a leg or an arm or even missing all 4 limbs, that's going to be encouraging. Read the room. Not always encouraging at that moment. Because if someone is not really ready to receive encouragement, then you should not be there prepared to give it aggressively. If it's not received, you can't be aggressive with it. You understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Good point. Yeah.
And it's very difficult to understand when that is ready. A lot of times people have to get to that point of breakdown before they can be built up. You know, and you can't encourage without building up, and you can't encourage while being broken down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You just have to find the reasoning there and try to pinpoint at what point, what does this leg represent for you?
Mhm.
You know, because there's a lot of times where your body represents something to you. The same way with breast cancer on a woman, those breasts represents her womanhood. You know, it's what initially first started making her feel like she was a woman, made her feel attractive. All of that is what fed her children. You know what I'm saying? That is a massive thing to take away from a woman, just like it would be for testicular cancer on a man, or having some type of penile cancer or something like that for a man. That would be completely taking away your idea of manhood in that retrospect. You know, even erectile, I mean, I'm talking to a bunch of men, so I don't really want to say this, but like that can change how you feel about who you are as a man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I feel really weird talking about this with y'all. But you understand what I'm saying? There's different aspects that make you feel like who you are.
Mm-hmm.
When that is taken away, that takes away who you are, your identity, you know, what your purpose is. And that's a whole other thing you have to figure out. You know, and as well as chaplains and ministers and so on and friends, they have to decide how they can facilitate and be there for you while this is going on. And a lot of times, sorry, what?
I was just gonna say, there's no way for you to give them back what they've lost in the way of an identity, or, you know, you just have to, and I'm throwing out my thoughts here, because I've never been in this situation, but I'm just guessing you just gotta let them know you're there with them to walk through, to be part of that hell, you know, like it said earlier, like the chaplain quoted, there's no way. I guess what I'm saying to myself is you can't fix their problem.
No.
You can help them. And I guess that's pretty much the way it is with anything, any of these scenarios. You can be there to help them walk through it and get to the other side, because there's no way to fix this.
You know,
Yeah,
I've been there many times.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to in those first few moments, even hours, is what we say we are, which is a ministry of presence. It's not what we say, it's just the fact that we are there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. A lot of times with these scenarios, you really have to figure out what these situations for these people, what it represents for them.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Just even like, for instance, when we were talking about the breast cancer with the woman, a lot of times it's what does her breast represent for her and her relationships, or her relationship, excuse me. You know what I'm saying? Is she going to be like, I mean, because a lot of times it's like, will my husband leave me? Will he find me attractive? You know, all that kind of stuff. Not so much as am I going to die, but is my relationship going to die?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Am I going to be alone because of this situation that I'm in?
Mhm.
And a lot of
Mhm.
times it's not necessarily the disease or the incident or the paralysis or any of these situations or the loss of a limb. It's literally, what does it represent for you? What are you actually losing? You may not be losing your breast. You may be feeling like you're losing your relationship. You get what I'm saying? And if you can identify that, you can work around it to also let her understand that her breasts are not what her husband, you know, that's not the reason he is completely with her. You understand what I'm saying? You know,
Mhm.
and the same way and vice versa, because so many relationships, there are people that are very selfish in that aspect. You know what I'm saying? And the moment that the least little discomfort they have, they book it. It doesn't matter if it's something simple or not. They're going to book it no matter what. So like I said, you have to find what these things represent. You know, was it losing the leg that they're having a problem with, or are they losing what that leg represented for them? Sometimes it could be just independence. You know, you have to get them to figure out a way that they are not dependent because they've lost something. They just have to find a new way to be independent. You know what I'm saying? There are several people that have no limbs that are completely independent. They just can't pop a tap on a Coke. You know, so I mean, it's just weird things like that. You know, that there's a friend of mine, Bob. I always called him Spud because he looks like a potato with roots. But he had a he had a blood disease that literally ate away his flesh. And before they could stop it, it literally, he was left with almost no legs left. And he had a little bit of his arms left. And it was funny because his name was Bob and he teaches little kids how to swim. So he's like bobbing in the water, teaching kids. They literally look
Wow.
like they're waterboarding him. But
Wow.
he found purpose, you know, in what he was doing. And he motivates other people, you know, despite their situation, to keep moving and to find new ways of living, you know. And so those are the kind of things that you can introduce to people as you see that they are ready to hear it. Like I said, I mean, you can sit there and witness to people, but if the Holy Spirit isn't calling them, they're not ready to hear it. So you shouldn't waste your words on the swine. You know what I'm saying? I
Mhm.
mean, that's the whole verse. Don't throw your pearls to the swine. So those kind of things, you don't want to waste moments with people. But you do need to figure out what everything represents for them so you can be prepared when the moments arise. If that makes sense. So, did y'all have any more scenarios that y'all would like to introduce, or does all of this make sense?
It does, yes.
Okay, good. Did y'all want to add anything or pop up another scenario? Like that's personal for y'all in the field?
Had a moment years ago where I was talking to a woman that needed bone marrow transplant, but she had so many problems in her life that she decided that she would not take the treatment and should go ahead and die. We talked for several hours and I kept feeling like God was telling me he couldn't make her problems go away instantly, but he could make her stronger and to handle her problems. And so that's what I kept telling her. Every time she would add another problem, I would say, I can't make your problems go away. God can't work that fast. He's got to work with hard hearts. I said, but I can introduce you to him because he's the one that can make you stronger to be able to go through all that you're going through. Mm-hmm. And after probably about saying that 4 or 5 times, she said, yes, I want this. I want this. And she asked Jesus to come into her heart. She went ahead and had her treatments, and she's still alive.
Amen.
Awesome.
Great testimony. Yeah.
Mhm. Anybody else want to add a situation that they're involved with or that they have been and how they dealt with it? And feel free to tell me to shut up and we can end this. I just want to make sure everybody has their spiel, I guess.
Well, I gotta say, Mel, I have never really, I guess, approached this subject before. I mean, we talk as chaplains, especially as first responders, we talk about actual deaths. We see it. The last few years of my career, I saw it about every other day, about every other shift. And, but I never really thought about, how to deal with a perceived death, except that I guess from my first question, I always kind of shoved it into the severe depression category, So, and knowing your background, I really shed a different light on how to deal with this. And like you said over and over, seeing where that person is, listening, not just to what the words they're saying, but their body language is huge in any kind of ministry, just to know where the person you're trying to minister is coming from.
Yes.
So I appreciate you bringing that to light. And this is a first for me, really, even as old as I am, to talk about perceived deaths.
Mhm.
So thank you. I appreciate what you've done.
Well, I mean, there's not much research into it. And the only reason why I've been a part of it was because I've been a big advocate for it, dealing with spinal cord injuries. And I mean, a lot of times they're like, well, you're just not textbook. You know what I'm saying? And it was a very demeaning thing to say. And that don't tell me that I don't fit in. You know what I'm saying? Don't tell me that I'm just not textbook. That's saying there's something wrong with me and not something wrong with what society is telling us. You know what I'm saying? And it was very frustrating. And I think the reason why I was like this was that from a very early age, I was fine with death. Like I found like every time that someone died, I mean, it was not so much an end to me, and that it was just, it made me appreciate everything that I had in the life and the time that I had to know them. And it made me want to meet every stranger I could ever meet, which is why I still to this day, I see somebody with a really gnarly looking scar and I'm like, oh, wait, why'd you get that? I mean, I got bruises on my arm from people poking at me, telling me to shut up because it's none of my business. But I'm like, I want to know. I mean, I could give directions to McDonald's with my scars. So it's like, I want to know if you have something interesting on you. I mean, people get asked about their tattoos. Why can't they get asked about their scars? It makes you human. To sit there and poke somebody and tell them not to ask means that person's experience doesn't have value. I mean, how many times does a kid go up to someone and see somebody in a wheelchair and the first thing they're trying to yank on their mom's skirt or their dad's sleeve and it's like, hey, what happened to her? And the parents automatically shush them and tell them not to acknowledge that, as if this person's experience is not worthy of that child's acknowledgement. And when you do that at that kind of impressionable age, you're basically telling them as they grow up, don't acknowledge that person, as if they're going to catch it or something. And then that devalues a whole society that they could be at any moment. Because all of us are about 5 minutes away from a paralysis or a diagnosis, and we don't understand that because right now we're healthy. But any moment that could be something different. I mean, you can be rich and in 5 seconds you're poor, Yeah,
that's right.
So, but anyway, I think we need to value life, but we first have to actually acknowledge the death that makes it sacred.
Amen.
But like I said, anyway, does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to say or add?
Melanie, I think you've done a wonderful job. I appreciate all that you have put into your presentation, and it was very encouraging to me. And at the end of the day, I guess what I'm saying is some kind of way as a chaplain and in this process, we need to give our, I won't say patience, we need to be able to show purpose in life.
Yeah,
I think what I'm gathering from this is when people get in these situations as a chaplain, I want to try and show them that they still value. That's value in their life. If you ain't got the one arm, you still can use the other arm.
Mhm.
With an eye,
Yes. Yes.
I want to. I think, from my perspective, what I see is it's not over yet. You don't know what God has planned for you,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
seen some people in my career as a chaplain who we thought was not going to make it, and they made it.
yes,
So God, when He done that, this person said, "Now I got a purpose now."
yeah,
So on it, my take
yeah,
on it, they
yeah.
are purpose. Thank you very, very much, Melanie.
Oh,
Amen.
thank you. I'm glad
Yes.
everybody
Thank you,
got
Mel.
something out of it.
Mel, is this gonna be available on our website, or is there some way to do that?
Yes, I'm gonna make everything available on the website. I'm gonna send it out to all the members and everything like that and post it on our YouTube. So yeah, all of that will be sent out.
They're awesome.
Okay. Okay. I don't know how to respond to that, but okay. Oh, let's see. Gary, would you like to close us out, or Percy, or whoever?
I'm sorry, Mel, what'd you say?
Oh, sorry, would you like to close us out and pray?
I'm sorry, I'm not, my hearing aids are about down and I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, Percy, would you like to close us out in prayer?
They run down about this time every night. They're getting old. And I just barely can perceive what you're saying right now. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay.
But I do appreciate what you've said. You know, when pastors find themselves in these situations all their life, really. And when someone is able to carry on, as you have talked about, and find self-worth and not give up and say, well, you know, I'm just dead. It's amazing to watch a person come back from what they first perceive is going to be the end of their life, basically.
Yes. Sometimes it's a new beginning.
It is. It is. A new career or a new
Yeah.
idea that they thought they couldn't ever do, and they find out they can do something very productive.
Yes. And a lot of times it has more purpose to it. Makes you feel better.
I was first hurt, I prayed, Lord, when she gets her life back. I prayed that every night. And one night, God stopped me right in the middle of my prayer and said, Wanda, she never lost her life. It's just changed. Stop saying that.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay. Well, ask Terry.
Um,
Terry person.
Oh, well, Percy, could you pray for us?
Yes, I can. I think that I heard a little bit of you, Melanie. But I also want to ask the group, we've got a big training coming up at the beginning of next month. In your prayer time, I'm asking that you will pray for traveling grace for those who will be traveling far and near, and pray for all the people who will be attending our course, and just keep me in your prayer that God will continue to use me as He can. And remember to pray for the AFFC. Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, thank you for being so kind, so merciful, and so patient. Thank you for Melanie, a purpose-driven life that I see in her, and every day I learn more and more about her, which encourages me to keep on keeping on. And I want to be an encouragement to her because she haven't given up. She's a real example of the
Yes.
race not given to the fast of the swift, but he or she who endureth to the end. Lord, I love Melody. Since I've known her, she's just been an amazing person, and all the hard work she's going through, and for her ministry, and the ministry of all the other people, the participants on this line. We ask you keep them in your keeping care as only you can. We ask this prayer, we ask all prayers in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Yes,
Amen.
amen. Amen.
Amen. Y'all have a great
Right.
night.
You too.
Too,
Thank
Melanie.
you.
Guys,
All right, thank
take
you.
care.
Thanks,